Medieval cooking was about physics and fatalism, not recipes. There was no 350 degrees, only the threat of poison. Here, you said your prayers and heated your skillet until it glowed red, doing whatever it took just to stay alive. Why was a copper pot a symbol of wealth and a deadly threat at the same time? How did dogs end up as roasting engines? And why could an ordinary dinner in London reduce the entire city to ashes? Today, we're entering a kitchen that really wanted to kill you. And the first question is, why was a simple-looking pot worth nearly half a cow and able to decide a family's entire future? Iron and bronze, the sacred cauldron. The star of the medieval kitchen was the cauldron. Heavy, grim, cast from iron or bronze. Cast iron became widespread much later. The cauldron didn't just sit in the corner, it literally ruled the house. Suspended from a heavy iron chain above an open flame, it could stay there for weeks on end. It was an endless cooking loop. Inside, they boiled the base of everything, the so-called potage, grain, beans, vegetables, a few bones. Whatever wasn't eaten today, tomorrow they just added water, threw in a handful of grain, and the cycle repeated. Why was it worth half a cow? Because in the Middle Ages, metal was their Bitcoin. If your cauldron got stolen, you didn't go to the store for a new one. You lost your main survival tool, no way to sanitize water, no way to cook rock-hard beans. Archaeologists find cauldrons made of nothing but patches, welded, riveted, and repaired for decades, passed from grandfather to grandson. Often, it was the most valuable thing in the house, after the roof. But this breadwinner had a nasty temper. Imagine 8 gallons of boiling thick stew hanging from a forged chain. One wrong move, a snapped link, a collapsing tripod leg, and you get a tsunami of scalding water and grease. In an age with no antibiotics, where your doctor prescribes a prayer for your burns, a falling cauldron often ended in tragedy for everyone near that fire. It was the perfect boiling tool, but useless if you wanted anything more than endless mushy porridge. And that's when a new material enters the scene, one that was both affordable and potentially lethal. Explosive clay, the hidden dangers. If the cauldron was the Iron King, the clay pot was the hero of the masses. It cost next to nothing, shaped from the dirt under your feet and sold at every market. But its simplicity was a total lie. First, it was a literal bomb. Medieval ceramics were fired crudely, meaning tiny air bubbles or micro cracks could easily hide deep inside the vessel's walls. You put that pot into glowing coals or accidentally nicked it with a poker and it could burst like a grenade, spraying boiling mush and razor-sharp shards across the entire kitchen. No gentle simmering without risking a shard in your eye. Second, convenience came at the cost of your health. Bare clay is porous. It soaks up fat, which goes rancid and turns any meal into a bacterial breeding ground. So they started glazing pots to make them waterproof and easy to clean. Looked beautiful. Very practical. But here's the catch. That glaze was made with lead. When something acidic simmered in that pot for hours, stew with apples, wine, or vinegar, the lead slowly dissolved and leached into the food. Back then, nobody knew heavy metals were toxic. People ate from this improved cookware for years, developing colic, paralysis, and madness, blaming it all on curses or bad blood. Here's the paradox. The richer the family, the finer their pottery, the higher their chances of slow, steady self-poisoning. The clay pot was king of porridge and vegetables, but it could never deliver what the medieval soul truly craved. A golden crust and the taste of real roasted meat. And roasting in the Middle Ages? That wasn't just cooking. It was a full-on battle with a furious elemental force. Turnspit dogs, engines of the hearth. When meat entered the kitchen, the rules changed. Roasting in the Middle Ages meant aggressive contact with open flame, smoke, and red-hot iron. To get that coveted golden crust, you needed spits. In castles, these were massive iron pikes holding whole carcasses. And that's when the real nightmare began for the staff. You had to turn that spit continuously, evenly, for hours, sometimes for days. Stop for 1 minute, the meat burns on one side and stays raw on the other. This filthy job went to the youngest servants. They stood inches from the roaring flames, breathing in black soot and constantly risking heat stroke. Later, in the 16th century, progress became truly absurd. In Britain, they bred a special kind of turnspit dog. The poor animal ran for hours inside a wooden wheel connected to the spit, basically acting as a living engine trapped in the middle of unbearable kitchen heat. No castle, you used frying pans, but these weren't the lightweight non-stick ones we use today. A medieval skillet was made of heavy forged iron, and it had a handle at least 3 feet long and sometimes even longer. Why so long? So the cook wouldn't catch fire just trying to reach the coals. The fat on these pans would ignite. There were no range hoods, no ventilation. All that thick smoke just filled the room. You could spot a professional cook by the permanent burns on their hands and their smoke-reddened eyes. But even if the cook was a master and the meat survived, one invisible problem remained. Fire demanded control, and the oven required jeweler-like precision. So how did they know the food was ready, with no tools except their own hand and gut instinct? Praying to cook. Timers for the soul. No clocks in the kitchen? How long do you boil an egg or simmer a sauce? Cooks used prayer timers. They measured time by how many Our Fathers or Hail Marys they recited. Literally, boil until you've sung the psalm 3 times. Cooking tied to the rhythm of faith and breathing. But a timer is only half the battle. How do you know your oven is hot enough without a thermometer? They relied on the flour test. You would toss a handful of flour onto the heated oven floor. If it ignited instantly, it was far too hot, and your precious bread would inevitably burn. If the flour slowly turns golden brown, the oven is ready. That was their precision calibration, based on the caramelization point of carbohydrates. Cooks also listened. A cauldron sang differently depending on how thick the stew was. Oil in a pan had to crackle in a specific way. That meant excess moisture was gone, and the temperature had climbed above 212 degrees Celsius. You could tame fire, you could measure time with prayer, but you simply couldn't make a deal with metal. And now, enter the high tech of the Middle Ages, shiny, expensive, and slowly killing its owner. The deadly Gleam, the poison in copper. Copper cookware was the iPhone of its era. Unlike heavy iron, copper heats up instantly. It was a revolution. Cooks could finally make delicate sauces and creams, things that would burn in seconds inside a regular pot. But that coin had a truly scorching flip side. Copper doesn't just heat up fast, it instantly turns heavy saucepan handles into glowing branding irons. You couldn't just grab it. One touch and you're badly burned. Working with copper meant living like a juggler. Hesitate for a moment. Either your sauce turns to charcoal or your palms blister. Shining copper pots on castle walls screamed wealth louder than any family crest. But behind that gleam was physics, working against you. Copper is an incredibly finicky metal. Add wine, vinegar, or even just apples to that pan, and the copper reacts immediately. It forms a highly toxic oxide layer. If you left a meal sitting in that pot until the next morning, you'd have concentrated poison. So they started tinning the cookware, lining the inside with a layer of tin. But tin is notoriously soft. Constant scraping with iron spoons and cleaning with sand would wear through that protection in weeks. And there was a temperature trap. Tin melts at just 450 degrees Celsius. If the cook got distracted and left an empty pan on the fire, the protective layer simply melted off. From that moment on, your food started soaking up the metal. Here's the paradox. While poor people ate porridge from safer iron cauldrons, the aristocracy spent years accumulating heavy metals in their bodies. But while cooks fought poison inside the pots, the kitchen itself was preparing a blow that could wipe an entire city off the map. From pan to ashes, when cities burned. A medieval city ignited like a bonfire. Narrow streets worked as chimneys, wooden beams as fuses, and kitchens became the launch points. All it took was one ordinary dinner. Chronicles tell of flames starting from an overturned skillet or overheated grease. The fire would hide at first, smoldering in the rafters, in the thatched roof, inside the walls. People went to bed thinking it was out. Then, at night, the wind turned one hearth into a firestorm. After entire districts turned to ash, authorities introduced fire inspections and banned cooking at night. The kitchen was no longer just a place to cook, it became a strategic asset, a source of heat and life, and at the same time a threat that could destroy thousands of homes in a single night. The medieval kitchen was a heavy cauldron that hung from its chain for years. It was a clay pot that could explode in your hands. It was a copper saucepan slowly turning your dinner into poison. Every scar on a cook's hand, every case of lead poisoning, every burned-out city, they were all steps on the ladder of evolution. It was from this struggle, with fire, with soot, with toxic metals, that the technologies we take for granted today were born. Stainless steel, non-stick coatings, precise thermometers. Just 500 years ago, the kitchen was a real battlefield, where a hot meal cost you your health and sometimes your life. Is there anything in your modern kitchen that you've kept for years, like that medieval cauldron? Maybe your grandmother's skillet, or an old copper jam pot? Let us know in the comments. Would you risk eating from real medieval cookware, knowing all its deadly secrets? And subscribe to the channel. There's a lot more fascinating history coming your way.